I needed a car. Not wanted, needed. At 17, every bit of my future felt tied to having my own wheels. No more begging rides from friends. No more waiting at bus stops in the rain. No more explaining to my mom why I missed curfew because the last bus ran late. My previous attempts at earning money had been disasters. The ice cream shop fired me after I dropped 3 cones in one day. The bookstore let me go when inventory counts kept coming up wrong. The grocery store? Well, let's just say I wasn't cut out for customer service. So when Mrs. Alvarez caught me between classes on Thursday, her face bright with that "I have an opportunity" look, I didn't immediately run the other way. "Emily, do you still need a part-time job?" She adjusted her glasses, smiling in that way adults do when they think they're solving all your problems. "Yeah. Why?" I shifted my backpack. The hallway emptied as the late bell rang. "I know a family in North Hills looking for a weekend babysitter. They pay very well." She handed me a sticky note with a phone number. "The Jenkins family. They have 2 boys. Call them today if you're interested." North Hills meant money. The kind of neighborhood where houses had names instead of just addresses. The kind of families who paid babysitters actual decent wages instead of whatever change they found in their couch cushions. One phone call and a brief, oddly formal interview later, I had the job. $300 for one night of watching TV after the kids went to bed. It seemed too good to be true, but my used car fund needed that money badly. That's how I found myself standing outside the Jenkins home Friday evening, staring up at what could only be described as a mansion. The house looked like it belonged in a horror movie, all stone and sharp angles, with well-cut hedges and grass, so even it seemed fake. A fountain bubbled in the circular driveway. I checked the address again, suddenly feeling underdressed in my jeans and plain blue t-shirt. The text from Mrs. Alvarez confirmed I was in the right place. 1422 Oakwood Drive. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the huge wooden front door and rang the bell. The chime sounded inside, more like church bells than a doorbell. The door swung open almost immediately, showing a tall man in a fancy suit. His dark hair was slicked back perfectly, and his smile looked fake. "You must be Emily. Right on time. I'm Michael Jenkins." He stepped aside, gesturing me in with a wave that seemed rehearsed. "Sarah and the boys are in the sitting room." I stepped into a foyer with ceilings high enough to make my voice bounce around when I said, "Nice to meet you." The inside of the house looked like a furniture showroom, perfect and untouched, as if no one actually lived there. No shoes by the door, no mail on the table, no sign that children existed in this space. Michael led me through a hallway lined with paintings of landscapes that all looked slightly wrong, trees too tall, mountains too sharp, skies too red. "We're in here, Michael." A woman's voice drifted from an open doorway. The sitting room contained more furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. A woman in a black cocktail dress stood as we entered. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it must have hurt, her makeup flawless, her smile as practiced as her husband's. "Sarah, this is Emily," Michael said. "Lovely to meet you." She extended a hand with perfectly manicured nails. Her grip was ice cold and too tight. "These are our sons, Nathan and Timmy." I didn't notice the 2 small boys on the couch at first. They sat so still and quiet. Nathan was 8 and wore a button-up shirt with khaki pants. His younger brother Timmy was 6 and dressed exactly the same way. Their dark hair was cut just like their dad's. Neither of them smiled. "Hi guys," I said, crouching down to their level. "I'm Emily. I'm going to hang out with you tonight while your parents are out." They stared at me without blinking. Their eyes were dark brown, almost black, and completely empty of the usual curiosity kids show when meeting someone new. "Say hello to Emily, boys," Sarah prompted. "Hello, Emily." They spoke in perfect unison, voices flat. No inflection, no excitement, no shyness, nothing. I tried not to look nervous. I brought some games we could play later if you want. No response, just those unblinking eyes. The boys are on a strict schedule, Sarah explained, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. Michael, we should show Emily around before we leave. The tour took less than 10 minutes. Kitchen with spotless countertops and a fridge full of labeled containers. Dining room with a table that could seat 20. Living room with the biggest TV I'd ever seen. Upstairs to the boys' shared bedroom, the only room that looked somewhat lived in, with 2 twin beds and a bookshelf of books that looked like nobody had opened them. The boys go to bed at 8:30 p.m. sharp, Michael explained as we returned downstairs. They've already had dinner. Sarah handed me a typed list on expensive-looking paper. These are the rules. Please follow them exactly. I looked over the list, expecting bedtime routines and emergency contacts. Instead, 1. Boys in bed by 8 gallows p.m. 2. Do not answer the phone. 3. Ignore any knocking at the door. 4. Check the boys' closet through the keyhole at 8:30 p.m., 9:30 p.m., 10:30 p.m., and 11:30 p.m. 5. If the closet door is open, close it immediately. 6. Do not enter any room with closed doors. 7. Do not leave the house under any circumstances. 8. We will return by midnight. I read the list twice, waiting for them to laugh and say it was a joke. They didn't. Is this serious? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Very serious, Michael said. The boys need routine. Any deviation upsets them greatly. Sarah opened her purse and pulled out 3 crisp $100 bills. This is for tonight. We pay well because we expect our instructions to be followed precisely. $300 for one night. My used Honda fund would jump from pathetic to almost there in a single evening. Okay, I said, pocketing the money. Whatever weird rules these rich people had, I could handle it for one night. So, check the closet, but don't open any closed doors? The boys' closet is different, Sarah said quickly. That one you check through the keyhole first, then open it if needed. And why can't I answer the phone or door? Michael straightened his tie. Solicitors. They're really pushy in this neighborhood. We don't want the boys disturbed. It still didn't make sense, but $300 bought a lot of not asking questions. Our number is on the fridge, Sarah said, slipping on a fur coat despite the mild Los Angeles evening. But we'll be at the Prescott Charity Gala, and they don't allow phones inside. Emergency services are, of course, 911. We'll be home by midnight, Michael added, ushering his wife toward the door. Boys, be good for Emily. Nathan and Timmy hadn't moved from their spot on the couch. They nodded in unison, but said nothing. After the parents left, the house became completely silent. No creaking floorboards, no distant traffic noise, not even the noise of appliances seemed to get through the thick walls. So, I said, turning to the boys, what do you guys like to do for fun? Nathan stared at me. Timmy stared at me. Neither answered. How about a board game? I brought Uno and Jenga. More staring. TV? Your dad mentioned you're allowed to watch until bedtime. Nothing. Okay. Are you hungry? Thirsty? Nathan finally spoke. We follow the schedule. His voice was flat, emotionless. The schedule says we go to bed at 8 Timmy added in the same monotone. I checked my phone, 7:45 p.m. Do you want to get ready for bed then? They stood up together and walked upstairs without saying anything. I followed, getting more creeped out by how they were acting, but I told myself they were just shy or maybe on the spectrum. Not every kid talks a lot. Their bedroom felt colder than the rest of the house. The boys changed into identical blue pajamas, brushed their teeth in the bathroom, and climbed into their beds without me having to tell them anything. Would you like me to read you a story? I asked, trying again to connect. No, Nathan said. The light goes out at 8 Nago. I glanced at the closet door, which was firmly closed. Something about it seemed off, maybe a bit taller than a standard door. the wood darker than the other doors in the house. "Okay then, good night, guys." No response. They lay on their backs, looking at the ceiling, hands folded over their blankets like little corpses. I turned off the light and shut their door, leaving it cracked an inch like my babysitting safety class taught me. The hallway felt warmer, and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Back downstairs, I sat on the soft couch and turned on the big TV, keeping the volume low. The kitchen clock said 8:05 p.m. when I heard it, the loud ring of an old-fashioned telephone breaking through the quiet house. I jumped, almost dropping the remote. The ringing came from a landline on the wall near the kitchen doorway. I hadn't seen it during the tour. The phone rang again, loud and pushy. I remembered the second rule on the list: do not answer the phone. My hand went halfway to the receiver before I pulled back. $300, I reminded myself. Just follow their weird rules for one night. The phone kept ringing, the sound getting on my nerves as I held the remote, trying to watch TV and ignore the feeling that something in this perfect house was really wrong. The phone rang 6 times before finally stopping. I sat frozen on the couch, remote in my hand, staring at the silent wall-mounted landline. The sudden quiet felt almost worse than the ringing. I focused back on the TV show, some cooking competition I wasn't really watching, and tried to ignore how fast my heart was beating. The Jenkins house felt too big around me, too quiet except for that intrusive phone. Everything about this place was making my skin crawl, from the perfect furniture to those quiet children. My phone showed 8:27 p.m., time for the first closet check according to the weird list of rules. I stood up, stretching my legs, which had gotten stiff from sitting so tensely. The stairs made noise under my feet, the first normal house sound I'd heard all evening. Outside the boys' bedroom, I stopped. The hallway seemed colder than the rest of the house, with shadows gathering in the corners, even with the overhead light on. I bent down, feeling a bit silly as I put my eye to the old-fashioned keyhole in the door. Check complete. Whatever I was supposed to be looking for wasn't happening, at least not yet. Back downstairs, I sat on the couch again, trying to get comfortable. The cooking show had ended, replaced by some crime drama with too much shouting. I flipped through channels, landing on a sitcom rerun. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. I jumped, nearly dropping the remote. The harsh, mechanical sound cut through the canned laughter from the TV. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. I held the remote tighter, my thumbnail digging into the plastic. Don't answer the phone. The rule seemed simple enough, but something about that persistent ringing made my hand twitch toward it. What if it was the Jenkins calling to check on their kids? What if there was an emergency? 4 rings, 5 rings, 6. Silence again. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and muted the TV. The quiet of the house pressed in around me. No sounds from appliances, no house settling, no trees moving outside. Just silence, thick and unnatural. My phone lit up, a text from my friend Caitlin. "How's the babysitting gig? Rich people house must be sweet." I typed back, "Kids are weird. House is fancy but creepy. They're paying me $300 though." The sitcom's silent mouths kept moving on screen. I turned the volume back on, needing some noise to fill the empty house. At 9:25, I went back upstairs for the second check. The rules said 9:30, but I wanted to get it over with. The hallway felt even colder this time, and I rubbed my arms as I walked toward the door. I knelt again, my eye to the keyhole. I stopped breathing. The closet door stood wide open. I blinked hard, thinking maybe my eyes were tricking me. But no, the dark wooden door that was definitely closed an hour ago was now open. I couldn't see inside from this angle, just darkness beyond the doorway. I slowly turned the doorknob and pushed the bedroom door open. The hinges made no sound, typical for this perfect house. I took a small step inside. The room felt wrong, colder than the hallway, with air that seemed thicker. Both Nathan and Timmy were in their beds, just like I'd seen through the keyhole. But something about how they were lying gave me chills. They were too still, too straight. like they were posed rather than actually sleeping kids who move around. I made myself walk across the room to the closet. Don't be a baby, I told myself. It's just a closet that came open. Old houses have doors that don't stay closed. Forget that everything else in this place worked perfectly. I grabbed the closet doorknob. The metal was freezing cold. I pushed the door closed quickly, not looking inside. The latch caught with a quiet click. I backed out of the room, only turning around once I was back in the hallway with the door shut. Back downstairs, I checked my phone. 9:37 p.m. 2.5 hours until the Jenkins would return. I could do this. For $300, I could handle pretty much anything. The sitcom had ended, replaced by some reality show with people yelling at each other on an island. I kept changing the channel, not really paying attention to what was on. At 10:15 p.m., a loud knock broke the quiet. I jumped to my feet, startled. The knocking came again, more urgent this time. "Hello?" A man's voice called from outside. "Is anyone in there? Let me in. I know they're in there." I moved to the window, carefully looking through a gap in the heavy curtains. A man stood on the porch, his face partly visible in the porch light. He looked middle-aged, with messy hair and a desperate expression. He wore a wrinkled jacket in the mild evening. "Please," he called out, pounding on the door again. "You don't understand what they are." Rule number 3. Ignore any knocking at the door. The man's fist came down harder, making the wooden door shake. "I lived here before them. I know what's in that closet." I backed away from the window, bumping into an end table and nearly knocking over a lamp. The man's words made me freeze. What did he mean? What they are? What's in the closet? I grabbed my phone and opened my messages, my fingers shaking as I typed a text to my mom. "Hey, everything okay with you?" I needed something normal to hold on to while the knocking kept going, getting more desperate every second. No response came. Mom was probably at her book club with her phone on silent. The pounding at the door got louder, then suddenly stopped. I heard footsteps on the porch, moving away, then back again. "I'm trying to help you," the man shouted, his voice muffled now, as if he'd moved to another part of the house. "They're not what they seem." I looked at my phone. 10:28 p.m. Time for another closet check, though everything inside me wanted to stay away from that room. But $300. And the rules. I had to follow the rules. With the stranger still shouting outside, I crept back upstairs, my legs feeling like lead with each step. At the boys' bedroom door, I knelt, my hands shaking as I put my eye to the keyhole. I stopped cold. Nathan was standing right on the other side of the door, his face just inches from the keyhole, looking straight at me. His eyes were way too wide, shining in the hallway light like a cat's. His face showed nothing, his mouth just a straight line. Behind him, I could see the closet door open again. There was no way he could have known I was coming to look through the keyhole. No way he could have stood so perfectly to stare back at me. Yet there he was, like he'd been waiting. I pulled back from the door, almost falling over. This couldn't be happening. Nathan had been asleep in bed just an hour ago. How did he know exactly where to stand? How did he know exactly when I would look? I jerked back from the door, my foot slipping on the hardwood floor. I nearly fell, catching myself against the wall with one hand. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the stress and the weird rules and that man screaming outside were getting to me. After another moment of hesitation, I grabbed the doorknob and pushed it open. Nathan and Timmy lay in their beds, both perfectly still under their blue blankets. Their eyes were closed, chests rising and falling in slow, even breaths. They looked completely normal, like two little boys sleeping peacefully. But the closet door stood wide open again. I stared at the boys, then back at the open closet. I could have sworn Nathan had been standing right there, looking at me through the keyhole. But here he was, in bed, apparently sound asleep. The yelling outside had stopped momentarily. In the silence, I forced myself to walk across the room toward the closet. The air felt cold against my skin, getting colder with each step. I reached for the closet door with trembling hands. I pulled it shut quickly, not letting myself look inside. The latch clicked, and I backed away, keeping my eyes on the sleeping boys. Neither of them moved. Neither showed any sign they knew I was there. I left the room, shutting the door behind me, and ran back downstairs to the living room. My hands were still shaking. I grabbed my phone from the couch, needing some connection to the normal world. The pounding on the front door started again, louder and more violent than before. The whole frame shook with the force of it. "Please!" the man shouted, his voice cracked with desperation. "You don't understand what they are. You need to get out of there." I backed away from the door, moving deeper into the living room. What did he mean by what they are? The boys? The Jenkins family? The knocking grew more frantic, the door rattling in its frame with each impact. "They're not human!" he yelled. "That thing in the closet, they're feeding it!" A chill ran through me. I looked down at my phone, then opened my text messages. This had gone beyond weird rich people and their strange rules. Something was seriously wrong in this house. I pulled up the contact information that Jenkins had left on the fridge and typed, "Someone's trying to break in. The boys are acting weird. Please come home." I hit send, then waited, watching the screen. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Sarah's response came through. "Follow the rules. We'll be home by midnight. It's almost over." I stared at the message. Almost over? What was almost over? And how could she be responding if phones weren't allowed at their gala? The man outside kept pounding, his voice getting raspy. "I lived here. I know what happens. They'll make you the next guardian if you stay." I sank onto the couch, holding my phone tightly. The TV was still on, some late-night talk show playing at low volume. The host's laughter sounded hollow and fake. The clock on my phone read 10:47 p.m. Just over an hour until the Jenkins returned. I could make it. I just needed to stay away from that bedroom and ignore the madman outside. At exactly 11 p.m., the television flickered. The talk show disappeared, replaced by static. Then the channels began changing on their own, flipping rapidly through news, cartoons, cooking shows, and more static. I hadn't touched the remote. It sat on the coffee table, several feet away. Outside, the pounding had stopped. The sudden silence felt worse than the yelling. I moved to the window and peeked through the curtains. The porch was empty. The man was gone. I tried to make sense of what was happening. The boys who moved without sound. The closet that kept opening itself. The rules that made no sense but that Sarah insisted must be followed. The strange man who seemed to know something about this house and the family. The TV continued flipping through channels on its own, pausing occasionally on images of static or distorted faces, before moving on. 11:25 p.m., 5 minutes until my final closet check. Every part of me wanted to skip it, to lock myself in the bathroom until the Jenkins came home. But Sarah's text kept playing in my mind. Follow the rules. I walked up the stairs again, feeling exhausted. The house felt different now. The air thicker, the shadows deeper. I stopped outside the boys' bedroom, my hand on the doorknob. Check through the keyhole first. That was the rule. I knelt down, bringing my eye to the small opening. I stopped breathing. Both beds were empty. The blankets lay flat and undisturbed, as if the boys had simply vanished rather than gotten up. And in the corner of the room, near the closet, crouched a dark shape. It wasn't human. It was too tall, too thin, with limbs bent at angles that shouldn't be possible. I couldn't make out any features in the darkness. Just a suggestion of something wrong, something that shouldn't exist in our world. I pulled back from the keyhole, my whole body shaking now. I didn't open the door this time. Instead, I backed away, then turned and ran down the hallway. The bathroom door was open. I ducked inside, locked the door, and started looking for something to barricade it with. The towel rack on the wall seemed strong enough. I yanked it free and wedged it under the doorknob, angling it against the tile floor. I sat on the edge of the tub, phone in my hand. 11:35 p.m., 25 minutes until the Jenkins were supposed to return. That's when I heard it. A soft scratching on the bathroom door. Gentle at first, like fingernails trailing lightly across the wood. Then harder, more insistent. Not knocking, not pounding, but a continuous scraping sound. The thing from the boys' room had followed me. I pressed myself against the far wall, watching the door handle. It didn't turn, but the scratching continued. Something whispered on the other side, too low for me to make out words, just a soft hissing sound that might have been speech. The scratching continued for what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes according to my phone. Then suddenly, it stopped. The house fell completely silent again. Not even the noise of the heating system or the ticking of a clock broke the stillness. I stayed frozen in place, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. The silence went on and on. I waited, counting the minutes on my phone, wondering what was waiting for me on the other side of the bathroom door. At exactly 12:05 a.m., I heard the front door open. Keys jingled, followed by the sound of footsteps and quiet voices downstairs. The Jenkins had returned. I stayed frozen in the bathroom for several more seconds, listening. The house felt different now. The oppressive silence replaced by the mundane sounds of people moving around. My legs trembled as I pulled the towel rack free from under the doorknob and set it against the wall. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped into the hallway. Michael and Sarah stood at the bottom of the stairs, still in their formal attire. Sarah's makeup looked perfect. Michael's tie hadn't moved at all. They looked up at me with mild curiosity, as if finding their babysitter wide-eyed and pale at midnight was completely expected. I walked down the stairs, holding the banister to steady myself. "There's something in the boys' room," I whispered, my voice cracking. I saw it through the keyhole. Something was in there with them, and then the beds were empty and... Michael held up a hand, stopping my rambling explanation. He nodded as if I'd just told him about a minor plumbing issue. "I'll check on them," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Sarah, get Emily some water." He brushed past me and went up the stairs, walking calmly without rushing. He didn't seem to care at all that I'd just told him something not human was in his kid's bedroom. Sarah touched my arm lightly. "Come to the kitchen," she said. I followed her in a daze, still trying to understand why they weren't reacting. Sarah got a glass of water from a pitcher in the fridge and gave it to me. My hand shook so much that water spilled over the top. She watched me take a sip, then reached into her purse. She pulled out 5 $100 bills and put them on the counter next to the $300 I'd already received. "We usually pay extra when things get active," she explained, her tone casual, as if discussing a standard overtime rate. I stared at the money, then back at her. "Active?" I repeated. That thing wasn't human, and the boys disappeared from their beds. Sarah straightened her dress. "The boys tend to wander at night. It's why we're so particular about the rules." "There was a man," I said, suddenly remembering. "Outside, pounding on the door and yelling. He said he used to live here, that he knew about whatever is in that closet." Sarah's expression changed. Her perfect smile faded, replaced by something harder, colder. "David Mitchell," she said, her voice tight. "He used to live here, became obsessed with the boys. He's been warned to stay away." I took another drink of water, trying to steady myself. "He said that you all aren't human. That the thing in the closet..." Her laugh cut me off. It sounded too perfect, like something practiced rather than genuine. "David has mental health issues. He developed strange delusions after his wife left him. The police are aware of his behavior." Michael returned to the kitchen, fixing his tie as he entered. His face didn't show any emotion. "Everything's fine now," he reported. "The boys are asleep." "What about the—" I gestured vaguely. "The thing I saw in the corner, near the closet?" Michael and Sarah exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "The thing in the closet comes and goes," Michael said, as if discussing a minor inconvenience like a drafty window. "It never hurts the boys." I nearly dropped my glass. They'd admitted it. Just like that. There was something in the closet, and they knew about it. "What is it?" I asked. "It's been here longer than we have," Sarah said with a small shrug. She glanced at Michael again, then back to me. "We've learned to coexist." I set my glass down on the counter with a sharp click. I should go. Sarah placed her hand on top of the money she'd already put down. "Actually, we wanted to discuss next weekend." She added 5 more $100 bills to the stack. "We'd like you to come back on Friday. We're willing to pay $1,000 for the night." I stared at the pile of cash. $1,000 for one night. That would bring my total to $1,800, almost exactly what I needed for the used Honda my cousin Jake was selling. "Why?" I asked, looking up at them. "Why me? After what happened tonight?" "You followed the rules," Michael said. "Despite the disruptions. And the boys like you," Sarah added. "They don't respond to just anyone." I thought about those children upstairs, their unnatural stillness, the way Nathan had stared at me through the keyhole, the way both of them had vanished from their beds. "I don't know," I said weakly, even as my eyes drifted back to the money. "It's just one more night," Sarah said, her voice soft and persuasive. "And after tonight, you know what to expect." Did I? I hardly understood anything that had happened. "The thing in the closet," I started. "What does it want?" "To exist," Michael replied cryptically. "That's all any of us want, isn't it?" I looked between them, these put-together people talking about a monster in their house like it was just some weird guest. Everything in me was saying to get out of there and never come back. But that car was just within reach. "I'll do it," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. I instantly regretted them, but when Sarah smiled and pushed the stack of bills toward me, I took it. "Wonderful," she said. "Same time next Friday. We'll be attending another charity function." Michael walked me to the door while Sarah stayed in the kitchen. The night air felt shockingly normal after the strangeness inside. "Remember the rules," Michael said as I stepped onto the porch. "They're for everyone's safety." I nodded mutely, clutching my money and my phone. "Oh, and Emily," he added, "don't research the house. It only confused David, and look what happened to him." I stared at him, wondering how he knew what I'd been planning to do. His smile never reached his eyes. My phone pinged with a notification. My Uber had arrived. The ride home passed in a blur. I kept seeing that dark shape crouched in the corner of the boys' room, kept hearing the whispered scratching at the bathroom door. I opened my phone's browser as soon as I sat down in the back seat of the Uber. I typed in the Jenkins address, 1478 Oakwood Drive, North Hills. The first few results were just real estate listings showing how much the house was worth. But a few links down, I found a local news article from 3 years ago about a family suddenly leaving their home on Oakwood Drive. The article mentioned that the owners, a family named Carson, had left in the middle of the night, leaving many of their belongings behind. I kept scrolling and found an older forum post asking about the weird house on Oakwood Drive, where a man named Lawrence Fleming had lived before moving away without telling any neighbors. A comment mentioned that the house had been empty for almost a year after Fleming left, until a family named Hudson had moved in for a short time. 3 previous owners, all of whom had left the property suddenly. The Uber pulled up to my house. I put my phone away and got out. As I walked to my front door, I felt like I'd agreed to something terrible. That by going back to that house, I was walking into something I wouldn't be able to walk away from. But I needed that car. Just one more weekend at the Jenkins house, and I'd have enough. I could handle one more night there, couldn't I? I spent the entire week obsessed with the Jenkins house. Every free moment between classes and after school, I hunched over my laptop, digging through local news archives and property records. The house on 1478 Oakwood Drive had a history that made my skin crawl. The property records showed a revolving door of ownership. No family stayed longer than 3 years. The pattern stretched back to 1987 when the house was first built. Before the Jenkins, there were the Carsons, who left in the middle of the night according to neighbors. Before them, the Flemings, who'd moved without forwarding addresses. The Hudsons before that, who'd stayed only 8 months. I found a small article from 1992 about a child who'd gone missing in the neighborhood. The search had centered around Oakwood Drive, but nothing was ever found. Another piece from 2003 mentioned unexplained disturbances reported by neighbors. Lights flashing throughout the block, strange noises at night. The police had investigated but found nothing. The most disturbing thing I discovered was a blog post from someone claiming to be a former babysitter for the Hudsons. They described children who barely spoke and strange rules about a closet. The post had been deleted, but I found it cached on an old forum. It ended mid-sentence. By Friday afternoon, I had a plan. I wasn't going in blind this time. I packed my backpack carefully. My phone with a full charge, a portable charger, a small wireless camera I'd ordered with express shipping, and a flashlight. I'd considered not going back at all, but every time I thought about backing out, I remembered the car, my freedom. Just one more night, and I'd have enough. I arrived at exactly 6 p.m. The house looked the same as before. Perfect stone exterior, manicured lawn, not a single leaf out of place despite the fall weather. I took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Sarah answered this time, her smile wide and practiced. "Emily, we're so pleased you came back." She ushered me inside, her hand cold against my back. The house felt different, knowing what I knew now, or at least what I suspected. The pristine surfaces and perfect decor seemed less like wealth and more like a stage set, a front hiding something underneath. Michael appeared from his study, adjusting his cufflinks. "Ah, Emily, right on time." He nodded approvingly. "The boys are upstairs getting ready. We'll be leaving for our event shortly." Sarah handed me the same list of rules as before. "Just to refresh your memory," she said. "The schedule is exactly the same." Michael cleared his throat. "I want to emphasize how important these rules are, especially checking the closet at the designated times and closing it immediately if found open." I nodded, trying to look compliant. "I understand." "Excellent," he said. "We'll be back at midnight, just like last time." I gathered my courage. "Before you go, can I ask you something?" They exchanged a quick glance. Sarah's smile stayed in place. "Of course," Michael said. "What's in the closet?" The question hung in the air. Sarah froze, her smile staying in place, but something behind her eyes changed. Michael answered too quickly. "Nothing to worry about," he said smoothly. "Just follow the rules and everything will be fine." "But last time, we really must be going," Sarah interrupted, checking her watch. "Boys, come down and say hello to Emily." Nathan and Timmy showed up at the top of the stairs. They walked down together, barely making any noise on the wooden steps. They were wearing matching outfits again, dark blue pants and light blue button-up shirts. "Hello, Emily," they said together, their voices flat. "The boys have already had their dinner," Sarah said. "Bedtime is still 8 p.m. Michael handed me an envelope. "Your payment, as agreed." I took it, $1,000, the final piece I needed for my car. "We'll see you at midnight," Sarah said, her hand on the doorknob. "Remember the rules." And then they were gone, the door closing behind them with a soft click. I turned to face the boys, expecting them to head upstairs to play like last time. Instead, they stood in the entryway watching me with unblinking eyes. "Do you want to play a game?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful. Neither responded. After an awkward silence, they turned and walked to the living room, sitting down on the couch side by side. They folded their hands in their laps and stared straight ahead at the blank TV. I followed them, feeling weird about how they were acting. "Are you hungry? I know your mom said you ate, but maybe a snack?" Nathan turned his head slowly to look at me. "We follow the schedule." I checked my phone. 6:15 p.m. Almost 2 hours until bedtime, and they were just going to sit there. "What do you usually do before bed?" I asked. "Wait," Timmy said. It was the first time I'd heard him speak on his own, not just echoing his brother. His voice was soft and high, like any 6-year-old's, but there was something off about it, like he was trying to mimic how a child should sound. I decided to try a different approach. "I'm going to make myself a sandwich. Are you sure you don't want anything?" Neither boy responded. I walked to the kitchen, still keeping an eye on them. The kitchen was super clean like the rest of the house, with food neatly arranged in the refrigerator. I made a quick sandwich, mostly just to have something to do rather than being hungry. When I came back to the living room, the boys hadn't moved at all. They just sat there staring straight ahead. I turned on the TV and flipped through channels until I found a kids' show with bright colors and happy characters. Neither boy seemed to care. The next hour went by in awkward silence. I tried asking them questions about school, their toys, or anything normal kids might talk about. They either didn't answer or just gave me one-word replies that went nowhere. At 7:30 p.m., without anyone telling them to, both boys stood up. "Dinner," Nathan said. I frowned. "Your mom said you already ate." "We eat at 7:30, Timmy insisted. I followed them to the kitchen, where they sat at the table. Not knowing what else to do, I opened the refrigerator and found 2 covered plates with small portions of chicken, vegetables, and rice. I heated them in the microwave and set them in front of the boys. They ate mechanically, taking small, precise bites. I sat across from them, watching. The only sound was the quiet click of forks against plates. Halfway through the meal, Timmy looked up at me. His eyes caught the kitchen light in a weird way, just like Nathan's had through the keyhole. "It's hungry tonight," he said. I felt a chill run down my back. "What's hungry?" He didn't answer, just went back to eating like he hadn't said anything. At exactly 8 p.m., both boys stood up from the table. Their plates were clean, not a crumb left behind. Without a word, they put their dishes in the sink and walked upstairs. I followed them, feeling nervous as I thought about the closet. In their bedroom, they changed into their blue pajamas in that weird robotic way like before. While they were busy, I quickly put my small camera on the bookshelf, pointing it toward the closet. The camera would send footage to my phone so I could see what happened in the room, even when I wasn't there. The boys got into their beds, pulling their covers up to their chests and folding their hands on top, just like last time. They just stared at the ceiling without blinking. "Good night," I said from the doorway. Neither responded. I turned off the light and pulled the door mostly closed, leaving it cracked just enough to hear if anything happened. Downstairs, I checked my phone. The camera was working, showing a dark room with 2 small shapes in their beds. The closet door was still closed. At 8:30 p.m., I made my first check through the keyhole. The boys lay still in their beds. The closet door was closed. Everything seemed normal, or as normal as anything could be in this house. I returned to the living room and checked my phone. The camera feed showed the same scene: 2 sleeping kids in their beds, a closed closet door. I tried to focus on the TV, but my mind kept going back to what might be behind that door. At 9 p.m., the phone began to ring. The same old-fashioned phone stuck on the kitchen wall, ringing with a loud, annoying sound. I let it ring, counting 6 rings before it stopped. Less than a minute later, it started again. I checked my camera feed. The boys hadn't moved. The closet was still closed. The phone rang a 3rd time. I walked to the kitchen and stood in front of it, watching the old dial shake with each ring. Who was calling? What would happen if I answered? I didn't touch it. 6 rings, then silence. At 9:30 p.m., I checked the keyhole again. The boys still hadn't moved. The closet door was still closed. I was starting to think that maybe this night would be different from the last. I was wrong. At 9:45 p.m., the pounding started. Loud, desperate knocks on the front door. I knew who it was before I heard his voice. "Let me in," David Mitchell shouted. "I know what's happening in there. You need to get out." I stayed in the living room, away from the windows. The pounding continued. "They're not children," he screamed, his voice cracking. "They've never been children, don't you understand? They're keeping it contained, but they're part of it." I checked my phone. The camera feed showed the boys still in their beds, unmoved by the commotion downstairs. The pounding grew more frantic. "Please, I lived here. I know what happens if you don't follow the rules." I muted the TV, listening to his desperate pleas. Part of me wanted to open the door, to hear what he knew, but the rules were clear, and after what happened last time. The pounding stopped suddenly. I heard footsteps moving around the porch, then silence. At 10 p.m., I climbed the stairs for my next check. I knelt at the keyhole, my hands shaking slightly as I looked through. Both beds were empty. The blankets lay flat and undisturbed, as if the boys had simply vanished. And the closet door stood wide open. Inside the closet wasn't the hanging clothes and toys I'd glimpsed earlier. Instead, there was absolute darkness, deeper and more complete than any shadow should be. And within that darkness, something moved. I couldn't make out what it was. Just movement within the void, something moving that made no sense to my eyes. I pulled back from the keyhole. "You shouldn't look at it directly." I spun around, nearly falling backward. Nathan stood in the hallway behind me with a blank face. His eyes shined in the dim light from the stairwell, almost like a cat's. "What is it?" I whispered. "What's in there?" Nathan tilted his head a bit, looking at me with those shiny eyes. "It's always been here, before the house, before everything." I looked back at the door, then at him. "Where's Timmy?" "With it," Nathan said simply. "It's his turn tonight." My mouth went dry. His turn for what? Nathan didn't answer. He just stared at me with those weird eyes, his face completely blank. I jumped back from Nathan, nearly tripping over my own feet. His eyes caught the dim hallway light, reflecting it back at me like a cat's, or something else entirely not human. "What are you?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's face changed, his lips stretching into what might have been intended as a smile, but looked more like someone who had only seen smiles in pictures and was attempting to recreate one. The expression never reached his eyes, which remained flat and reflective. "We're protectors," he said, his voice still carrying that eerie flatness. "It stays in the closet if we're here." I backed up against the wall, putting distance between us. "Protectors? What does that mean? What is that thing?" "It's hungry," Nathan replied, as if that explained everything. "It's always hungry, but it stays in the closet when we're here." The sound of the pounding at the front door suddenly stopped. The abrupt silence felt almost as jarring as the noise had been. I looked toward the stairs, wondering if David Mitchell had given up and left. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of glass breaking downstairs. Someone was breaking into the house. "He shouldn't be here," Nathan said, his head tilting at an odd angle as he listened. "It doesn't like strangers." I pushed past Nathan and ran down the hallway toward the stairs. Whatever was happening, I couldn't let some stranger break into the house while I was responsible for the children, even if those children weren't exactly normal. I took the stairs two at a time, nearly stumbling at the bottom. The sound had come from the kitchen. I ran through the dining room and skidded to a stop at the kitchen entrance. David Mitchell was halfway through the window, surrounded by shattered glass. His face was wild with desperation, a small cut on his cheek dripping blood. He froze when he saw me. "You need to get out of here," he said, his voice hoarse from all the shouting he'd done earlier. "Right now, before they come back." "You're breaking into the house," I said, grabbing my phone from my pocket. I'm calling the police." "The police won't help," he said, pulling himself the rest of the way through the window. Glass crunched under his shoes as he stood. "They never do. I've tried." I backed up, keeping distance between us. "Stay where you are." He held up his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm trying to save you." His eyes darted around the kitchen, then back to me. "Where are they? The boys?" "Upstairs," I said, then immediately regretted giving him that information. "No, they're not," he said with certainty. "Not both of them, anyway. One of them is with it, in the closet." A chill ran down my back as I remembered what Nathan had said about Timmy. It's his turn tonight. "What do you know about them?" I asked, still keeping my distance. "What are they?" "They're guardians," David explained, his words coming out in a rush. "The thing in the closet, it's ancient. It's been here long before the house was built. It needs to be contained, and it needs to be fed." "Fed," I repeated, my mouth going dry. David nodded, his eyes wild. "The children aren't children. They never were. They're its keepers, its guardians. As long as they're here, it stays in the closet. But if they leave..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Because I lived here," he said. 3 years ago. My wife and I bought this house. We didn't know. No one told us. But then we started hearing things at night, seeing things. The closet, it was always cold around that closet. I remembered the ice-cold doorknob, the way the air seemed thicker near the closet door. "What happened to your wife?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. David's face crumpled. "She became one of them, a guardian. She changed. Her eyes..." He gestured vaguely toward his own eyes. "Like theirs, reflective, wrong. And then one day she told me we needed to adopt. That we needed children to help protect the house." My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down at it and saw a notification from my camera app. Motion detected. I opened it with shaking fingers. The camera I'd hidden in the boys' room showed the closet, which now stood wide open. But it wasn't just open. It seemed to be getting bigger. The darkness inside it didn't look like a normal closet interior. It looked like a void, an impossible space that couldn't exist within the house. And at the edge of that darkness, a thin, stretched-out shape moved. Not quite human, not quite anything I recognized. "Oh my God," I whispered, turning the phone so David could see. His face went pale. "It's coming out. We need to leave. Now." Before I could respond, the front door opened. We both froze, staring toward the entryway. Michael and Sarah Jenkins walked in, still dressed in their nice clothes. Their faces were grim as they looked at the scene, the broken window, David standing among the glass, me holding my phone. "You've broken the rules," Michael said, his voice cold as he looked at me. We were very clear about the rules. "I didn't let him in," I protested. "He broke in through the window." "Not just that rule," Sarah said, stepping forward. Her eyes changed as she moved into the kitchen light, the pupils reflecting the same way Nathan's had. "You looked into the closet when you weren't supposed to. You recorded it." David grabbed my arm. "We need to go, right now." Michael rushed with unexpected speed, blocking the doorway to the dining room, our path to the front door. "No one's going anywhere. The entity requires a new guardian." "We hoped you'd volunteer, Emily," Sarah said, her voice soft but her eyes hard and reflective. "You seemed perfect, responsible, alone. No one would miss you right away, but now we'll need someone else." She turned her gaze to David, who backed away in terror. "No," he whispered. "Not again. I got away." "No one gets away," Michael said. "You just delayed the inevitable." I looked down at my phone again. The camera feed showed the dark spot in the closet getting bigger, with darkness spreading into the boys' room. And inside that darkness, something was forming. I didn't wait to see more. I shoved my phone into my pocket, grabbed my keys from the counter, and made a quick decision. While Michael and Sarah were focused on David, I ran toward the broken window. Glass cut into my palm as I held onto the windowsill, but adrenaline dulled the pain. I pulled myself through the opening, ignoring Sarah's shout behind me. I landed hard on the grass outside, got to my feet, and ran toward my car in the driveway. Behind me, I heard more glass breaking and David's scream, a terrifying sound that suddenly stopped. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The porch light came on, lighting up the front of the house. I looked up as the engine started and saw the Jenkins family standing on the porch. Michael and Sarah in front, Nathan and Timmy standing weirdly still beside them. All 4 pairs of eyes shined in the light. I put the car in reverse, backing out of the driveway so fast I nearly hit the mailbox. As I shifted into drive, I saw something else come out of the house. Something tall and thin, with limbs that bent in ways they shouldn't. It moved in quick, weird jerks, not like anything normal. I called 911 as I drove, the phone on speaker beside me. When the operator answered, I tried to explain what had happened. The break-in, the screaming, the family that wasn't a family. I didn't mention the thing I'd seen coming out of the house. They already wouldn't believe half of what I was saying. Officers will be dispatched to the address, the operator assured me. Are you safe now? I'm driving away, I said, checking my rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. But I don't think the police will find anything wrong when they get there. The Jenkins, they're good at hiding what they are. Just get yourself somewhere safe, the operator said. Do you need medical attention for your injuries? I looked down at my bleeding hand, the cuts from the window glass stinging now that the adrenaline was wearing off. No, I'm okay. Just some cuts. After I hung up, I kept driving, putting as much distance as possible between myself and that house. In my rearview mirror, the road remained empty, but I couldn't stop checking it every few seconds. I thought about David Mitchell's scream, cut off mid-sound, about Sarah's reflective eyes and her talk of guardians, about Nathan's words, "It stays in the closet if we're here." But I'd left, and in my final glimpse of the house, I'd seen it emerge. The thing that had been trapped in that closet, now free. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor, pushing my old car faster than it wanted to go. The engine whined as I sped through the night, away from 1478 Oakwood Drive and whatever very old horror had been released from its prison.